Democracy is not something we watch, something that we practice. We do not have to be perfect at it. We just need to be consistent. So that is what we are doing right now by reading about this bill. Let's get caffeinated. Hey, I'm Cassie Clayton, your caffeinated, curious, civic catalyst friend. Get over into my channel, Where Coffee and Calculated Curiosity over here. Sees all day. And this is 52 bills. And I am going to be walking through a federal or state bill the next 52 weeks. And I am really glad that you're here with me. We are going to be learning together. The way that we shape our world, the very human things that we want to be able to do, are limited and expanded to us based off the type of policies that we live under. So if we want to have more agency as humans in our lives, we need to both understand and influence the policies that govern us. Without hot takes and opinions, I am going to be doing my best to walk us through each bill, share the pros and cons that I'm seeing, allow us to critically think through why both are present, because they always should be for most any type of bill that's going to be out there and available. We want to objectively look at the bill, decide what we need to do. What legislators should we reach out to? And how do we publicly comment on these bills? What I'm going to be keeping track of is a public bill tracker to start us out on a real Washington state bill. HB 1687 makes a narrow update to the Housing Corporation Law. It allows social housing public development authorities to use the same tools that public housing authorities already have. Welcome to the Washington State Legislature. Thank you for having us. This bill is 1687. Boop. And then we hit search. Now, what is going to come up for us is the bill at a glance. We can see HB stands for House. It's going to have an SB if it's in the Senate. This is in the House rules right now. It's in a committee right now. What this is telling us is the process of where this bill has been, and then we can kind of see where it might go next, but we don't actually know where it would really go next. Right now, the bill was introduced, and we can see where it was introduced. Right here, the first reading was in 2025, January 29th. Okay? If I was to click on the View Original Bill, that would pop up for me and tell me where it was first read. It has to pass the House before it can go to the Senate, pass in the Senate, before it can go to the governor's desk. And then the governor has to sign it or veto it, and then it could become a law. That still is not enforcing it as a law. That is just making it a law. So we're going to be uncovering a lot of different things that can be happening when these bills are put forward, when they're read, and what do they mean and where do they go next. House Bill 1687, here's the term, where it says, concerning social housing public development authorities. Does that mean anything to you? That's why we are here. You got to get into the bill to know what that means. Let's go into some of these bill reports. That's the first place that we can kind of start looking around at the analysis and what's happening. Brief bill summary. Authorizes the state or local government to assist a social housing public development authority in the planning, construction, or operation of housing projects under the Housing Cooperation Law. Are we clear yet? No? No? Okay, great. Me either. So next what we can get into is the background. Public development authorities. What are those? Because that seems to be a crucial piece of information that we would need to know to understand what this bill is doing. Because again, it says concerning social housing public development authorities. Public corporations that cities and counties can form are commonly referred to as public housing authorities. They can assist in federal grant administration enhance government efficiency and services, and improve urban living conditions. This seems very important. If you are in an urban living condition, what do we generally hear about urban living? That is big city living, and we hear a lot about affordability, and we hear a lot about homelessness, right? We might hear other things, traffic, or always construction, this other stuff that we hear. It's a subtext of the text. If it's going to improve urban living conditions, we should be starting to think in our minds, maybe that means it improves affordability. Maybe that helps to counteract homelessness. We don't know. We're going to see what the bill is going to claim. But that's what it's there for. PDAs, public development authorities, have a broad statutory authority to perform any lawful public purpose or public function, but they cannot undertake a function that creating city or county would not see as lawful. So this means that each city or county can also decide what is lawful to perform. That is something to keep in the back of our minds, that again, when we think of slower processes that maybe help or hinder, when each city can decide on its own or each county can decide on its own, that might mean that some things might go through and other things might not go through. So keep that in our minds. Although PDAs may be created for general purpose, they are often created for a specific project or undertaking. The city or county creating the PDA must oversee its operations funds. Funds is important. Anytime we're talking about money, you know that there are going to be counter arguments. Anytime money comes up anywhere, people think restrictions, people think lack of instead of surplus of. PDAs are subject to general laws regulating local governments. Housing cooperation law. The housing cooperation law provides procedures for state and local governments to assist public housing authorities in the planning, construction, and operation of housing projects. This is the type of projects that they might be helping with. The assistance looks like grants, leasing, selling properties or easements, providing services, funds, loans, in-kind support, dollar sign support, providing infrastructure or recreational facilities in connection with a housing project. Exceptions from zoning, building regulations, or ordinance codes. Different places in your city have different ordinance codes, have different zoning laws. There are different things that apply to public housing developments that do not apply to private housing developments. So we'll be talking about that a lot, because when we get into the laws that govern us, public and private are very different things, and they have different rules, and they generally don't line up to be anywhere near the same things. The state or local government is authorized to exercise these powers that we just read, provided by the Housing Corporation Law. That is the current law that we're under in the state of Washington. Okay. So what does this bill do? Here, we're still getting into it, right? Like, this is a lot. Social housing PDAs are defined as a public corporation. Important. Created for the purpose of developing, maintaining, and operating subsidized and cross-subsidized rental housing that is made available to households of any income and publicly owned in any perpetuity. So let's slow all the way down on this. We are going to get into what the definition of subsidized and cross-subsidized is. They do provide us that in the summary of the bill. But we should be thinking again, this is developing, maintaining, operating. All of those things cost time, money. Different people are in the works. Different types of corporations are in the works for that. So that is something to already be thinking about. This is a lot of different moving pieces in those three words alone. Subsidized means the use of financial contribution to reduce the rent for low-income households. Cross-subsidized means the rate of rents for high-income households support lower rates of rents for low income and moderate income households. This is an offset situation. If someone's fully paying their much higher rent and they have a high income, that means they could be actually the ones subsidizing. It's not a government subsidization, a financial contribution from the state or federal or local government, or from nonprofits that have raised money for such things. The actual design and dollar signs there, we will go look up, because what is high income in some states might not be high income in other states. What is low income in some states might not be low income in other states. So it's really important to know when we're looking at a state bill that we're getting the state facts, the state dollars. Let's go look up the rates, okay? I go to Google, right? I like Google. That's where we're going to start. All right. So because we all live in the age of AI, we get something that instantly pops up, but we need to go check the source, all right? We have always got to check the source. I love that it is a pretty little overview and it looks really easily to be benchmarked out of here, and it could be correct, right? Like some of these could be correct, but you don't know until you go click. So you see the little link for the clicking? Where are we? Let's go look. Pew Research is always a great spot to go. Also, Income by Zip Code, USA Facts, NerdWallet. Okay, so these are some trusted resources. Don't look at just one. Let's go look at a few. Pew Research. Are you in the American middle class? I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know we were going to traumatize each other in the very first YouTube call. We're going to get into, we're looking for Washington State. This is going to be one that I'm going to throw in the notepad. We already have a breakdown of if we're in Seattle. This is going to give you an instance again. Probably Seattle is going to have a very different high, middle, low than Spokane. Okay, so this is again more places to stop, to think, what are they meaning where? So let's say our household income, what is the average anyway? Upper class in Washington, throw in here $100,000 before taxes. And this is for a family of 4, middle class in Seattle. This is not a high earner in Seattle, right? To get into the high earner category, maybe we need to go quite a bit higher. Upper class, we high income, probably we're looking at a tier such as this. Now, if we were to switch over to, let's go to Spokane, that's on the other side of the state. Let's go back to our $100,000. We're middle class over there still. $50K a year, you're in the lower income bracket. When we go back in and we're reading this bill that says what income levels would be cross-subsidizing lower in middle income levels. The state or local government may assist in social housing PDA in planning, construction, or operation of housing projects. The executive of the state or local government, rather than the governing body, is authorized to exercise the powers provided under the Housing Corporation Law. Show you how to read these differences. The governing body of the state or local government is authorized to exercise powers provided under the Housing Corporation Law. This is coming down here to say the executive of the state or government instead of the governing body is authorized to exercise the powers provided. So that means something different is happening here. Now we need to get into who's the governing body of the state or local government and who is the executive of the state or local government. That's the governor. There might be an executive for a specific county. King County has a county executive. When would the bill take effect? Once it's passed. What is the staff summary of the bill? So what we read on the last page was a nonpartisan, need to highlight this text. The analysis was prepared by nonpartisan legislative staff for the use of legislative members in their deliberations. When they're reading through the bill, when their teams are reading through the bill, what do they need to know? So the partisan piece says this bill relates to an existing law that allows cities to waive certain development regulations for housing development by housing authorities. This would give cities the authority to waive some of those same requirements for housing projects by social housing PDAs. Social housing is publicly owned mixed income housing development. Currently, the only social housing PDA is in the city of Seattle. So for the whole state of Washington, social housing is defined as publicly owned mixed income housing development. Public housing is defined nationally. Social housing is not, but the state of Washington has defined it. Committee, again, a partisan summary. This bill makes a small change to the housing corporation law, which is commonly used by cities to create cooperative development agreements with public housing authorities. This bill would allow cities to create cooperative housing agreements with social housing authorities. There is only one social housing public development authority in Seattle. The voters recently voted this authority to provide long-term, publicly owned, mixed income housing for the city. The city has to approve any actions taken by the social housing authority under the cooperation law. Let's go see where this is. So again, we need Seattle Housing Levy. The Seattle Social Housing Developer. Where are these things coming from? Ballot measures, King County. Seattle is in King County. Measure here in 2023. Initiative, City of Seattle initiative concerns developing and maintaining affordable social housing in Seattle. This measure would create a public development authority to develop, own, and maintain publicly financed mixed income social housing development. So we've already talked about what all of those words mean. The city would provide startup support for PDA. The city would determine the amount of ongoing city support. Before it transfers any public lands for nonprofit use, the city would be required to consider a transfer to the PDA, Public Development Authority. The PDA's charter would govern the election, composition, and duties of the PDA's board of directors should this measure be approved. So what we want to see is, I think we already know that it did pass, but in 2025, National Low Income Housing Coalition, Seattle voters approved ballot initiative to fund social housing developer. And 71% of voters, so we could look this up. It's the same one that we just read from 2023. The question, a yes vote supported using revenue from taxes on payroll expenses in order to fund the development and maintenance of social housing in Seattle, either by establishing a new tax or using the existing payroll tax, and a vote opposed to that. Again, supported implementing Initiative 137, which was designed to establish a new tax of 5% on annual compensation above $1 million, very important to look at, paid in Seattle to any employee in order to fund social housing. This passed as well. The election results, these two questions, overall, 72%, almost 73% voted yes. That's what they're talking about when they're saying that this was chosen by the voters in Seattle to be able to fund social housing. And that is a lot of information about one bill, right? So I want to show you another way that we can look at this and get into what's going on with this bill. Using Digital Democracy Project. Digital Democracy Project is a passion project that I am extremely excited to talk about and to be able to use here on the channel and with you. Under the bills, we can go in to see for Washington that this bill has been added. You're welcome. But also, let's get in here. Concerning social housing, public development authorities, House Bill 1687. Okay. What is this bill? This bill updates Washington housing law, so public development authority tools and zoning flexibilities also apply to social housing. Allows cities to waive certain zoning rules and support projects that lower costs and speed up mixed income, publicly owned housing for low and middle incomes, which is what is social housing, as we define it. Public housing serves only low-income households. Social housing serves mixed incomes to create more affordable multi-family homes. So now we want to get into pros and cons. So number one, and a very big positive, this bill is the first major bill that unlocks capacity that already exists. It's a statewide enhancement for every single local government in the state of Washington, and is the ability to support publicly owned, permanently affordable housing, helping reduce pressure on public housing. And that could be really positive, right? If you don't qualify for public housing, but say you're slightly above that, but you're not really in the middle, you're nowhere near the upper class, there's not a public housing affordability option for you. Social housing starts to get to that middle area of making housing more available. Knowing how to use this law, how to use these agreements, courts already recognizing them, construction staff and developers already knowing what those rules are, and now it actually reduces friction, reduces legal friction, speeds up development. Okay, that's a positive. Seems like a positive to me. Another pro here for the bill would be housing is expensive largely because of a long delay. We constantly hear we've not built enough housing. We've not built enough housing. There's housing that needs to be built. Everything would be more affordable if we had more of it, right? So perhaps in HB 1687, it allows the cities to waive certain zoning or building requirements on a project by project basis. That doesn't mean they're going to just wipe away all of those zoning requirements for all projects. It would be looked at project by project. Maybe a certain location needs fewer parking requirements or height limitations, more flexibility on the type of development that's being used. Social housing are multi-family dwellings. So think apartments, think more along the lines of townhomes, condos, multiple homes built on one lot. These are not single family homes. Lower costs for projects could mean lower rents long term. That matters because many people are earning too much for public housing, but not enough to compete in today's market with rent prices in anywhere that they choose to live. But we are looking at the state of Washington right now. We're looking at Washington as a whole. That stability across income levels prevents crisis and protects public housing resources. So if there's less of a funnel from middle to lower to lowest incomes, then there's less people on the street needing public housing. Social housing relieves pressure on public housing. It does not replace it. I think that's something that should be very clear when we make any public comment about this type of a bill. Public housing is still very much needed. Social housing can help alleviate where public housing can't reach. We need both still. Okay, now let's talk about some cons. In con, I don't know if we like that word. We'll talk about limitations. We should talk about who might be, like, why would you oppose something like this? If we're reading it, we're trying to be objective, and we're saying what is it going to cost us? How about that? Maybe that's a better way to say it if I'm thinking about this out loud. What does the bill not guarantee? People can have a really great mindset on wanting to do innovation, but they see something and they're like, well, how are you going to make that happen? How do we know that that's going to happen? And that kind of comes out in a lot of different ways that seem pretty harsh. But maybe what they're trying to get to when we're thinking about this critically is maybe they're thinking this does not guarantee that housing gets built. This opens up the availability for cities and counties to use the same resources that public housing has. This does not snap our fingers and have housing created today, tomorrow. It creates permission for, but not production of. This bill it's lowering, it is lowering the barriers, but it's not forcing any outcomes. So someone might object to this on, I don't see the full follow through here. Why am I spending my time reading this bill and trying to get it to push forward when there's not any guarantees that something's going to come up? We have to say that as legitimate limitation or con. Someone might see that as a negative of the bill. This one, mixed income housing that includes low and moderate income renters may divert resources away from lowest income residents. There are critiques around allowing mixed income housing to be part of public housing resources in some ways, shapes, and forms. They worry that the middle income is going to dilute the resources for lowest income. Some people believe in like only the lowest income households should have any public housing resources at all. More of a values debate, perhaps, not a technical debate of this bill. But maybe the bill, it could go back and be clearer about how much where is allowed. The bill does say cross-subsidized. We looked at that and we looked at what that means. That is a resource that is not taking away from lower income, right? That would be the full subsidized. But cross-subsidized, that's coming from something else entirely. I would make sure that's in here. That should be in here. Some people could get hung up on that. This is not a moral judgment zone we're observing about the bill. Next, a legitimate concern around zoning flexibility, creating local pushback. So what we might see is in cities that waive zoning requirements, political pressure can slow down or block those new builds. If someone says, I don't want a public housing development in my neighborhood because you would have to cut down these trees to do that's a legitimate thing that someone might come up with and go to City Hall that I've seen and heard at City Hall before, right? So that would slow down more bureaucratic delays. The bill, HB 1687, does not remove that friction. It only removes legal barriers to be able to use PDAs, public housing authorities, tools, and zoning restrictions, etc., zoning laws for social housing. I think we've touched on this a little bit, again, about limitations, but this bill is not a solve for labor shortages. Where might we be seeing those right now? This is not a solve for material costs. If everything is much more expensive right now, just think about that. Those things still apply. Labor shortages, material costs, those are still higher. This does not give those things a break. This is a legal change in the law that allows social housing to tap into already established governance that public housing uses. This does not fix everything. It does work really well as part of a bigger strategy of everything being used together. We made it! You might still have questions. You might still want to dig into what does this actually mean. Let me show you what is really cool about the Votes app with the Vote Spot. I have said, could you provide me with a sentence on why I would support HR 1687 and a second sentence on why I would oppose 1687, that I could send it to my legislature. It's processing that right now. Why you want to use it in here is because it is reading the bill text and language itself. So it knows that this is the Washington State HR 1687 and the actual text that's in that bill, versus if you were to just ask your random chatbot somewhere else, it might not know which one you're talking about. So here we have to move this out of the way. Certainly, here are your brief statements for both viewpoints. Support. You might support HB 1687 because it would create public development authorities to increase affordable social housing, helping to address the housing crisis and provide more stable options for low and middle income residents. Oppose. You might oppose 1687 because you are concerned about the cost of establishing public development authorities, which we're not. I think that's another thing about this bill is it's not creating it's not creating public housing authority. So I would, now that we know that, and this is the bot, we could interact with the bot and say, HR 1687 does not create public development authorities. It allows social housing to access those public development authorities. So could you rewrite the support and oppose positions with that in mind? This is how we work with AI, okay? AI as a partner with us, not separate tool doing it for us. We are doing it together. And then we will also ask it for a neutral statement because, you guys, we might be neutral on this. And as I'm showing you right now, I am not logged in. I don't have any special access into the VoteBot or into Digital Democracy Project to be able to do this, right? This is what you can do right now by yourself. Here's the rewrite. This is better. Support. You might support HB 1687 because it allows social housing providers to access existing public development authorities, making it easier to fund and develop affordable housing projects without creating new bureaucratic structures. Nice. You might oppose 1687 because you are concerned that expanding access to public development authorities for social housing could divert resources from other priorities or blur the lines between public and private sector housing. Okay, pretty good. So next we're going to say, would you write a neutral statement that I could choose to send instead of support or oppose? See what happens? Neutral statement. I'm writing to share my interest in this bill. I hope lawmakers will consider the potential impacts this bill could have on housing affordability and community resources before making any decisions. Fairly neutral, but they know that you've read it. And I think, again, the more comments that come out, positive, opposed, neutral, that means more people are paying attention. And if more people are paying attention, your representatives are going to be paying attention more. That's how this works. So I love this. So you could then very easily, you could copy this out and put your own little spin on it and take it over right into the public comment section, which is where we are going. We have gotten through the bill. We've got a summary of the bill. We know where the bill is. We have talked about some legitimate pros and cons of the bill. Now it's time to talk to your legislators. You can click on send a comment to your legislators. So that's really, really cool and helpful from the state of Washington. And when you open up that page, it says what bill we're commenting on concerning social housing public development authorities. You can follow the steps to send your comments and your position on the bill directly. And it's going to go to your legislative district already. Isn't that amazing? There are other ways to participate, and we're going to talk about calling in on the phone, and we'll talk about social media messaging. We'll do all the fun things because it doesn't take that much time, and you're already used to interacting on those formats anyway. You have to pay attention to these rules, okay? You cannot threaten someone who's a public servant. We don't want to do that. It's messy behavior. Not threatening them, not their bodies, not their vehicles, not their property, not the state's property, not the state's vehicles. We are not doing any of those things. We are objectively talking about a bill that would objectively change the lives of people that live in the state. You have got to put in your information. The district you entered is District 43. Select one or more of your legislators to receive your comment. You've got to select at least one. It's going to all three of them. Yeah, we're telling everybody. If we're going to take the time to go through a bill, to figure out what's going on with it, to do this level of a debrief, we're sending this note out to everyone. Would you like a response? Yeah. Then I know that they got it. That would be nice, right? My personal information is added in. Now, here are your choices, okay, for the Washington State bill. Support, oppose, neutral. You can say that you're neutral and just provide some points if you feel like. You can say that you're opposed. You can say that you support. So I want for you to think about how you see this bill and decide what you would like to say about it. This channel and my ideas on how I feel about this bill are not relevant to breaking it down. All right, hold on. Give me just 1 second while I add in my specific opinion. Do you want a copy of this to your email? Yes, might as well get me that back. I am not a robot, as you guys can see, and I am sending my comment. Thank you. Your email was sent. Amazing. Now, let's cover a couple of things when we come back to getting this information over to our legislators. All right. Number one, a public comment is not a vote. You can come in to Digital Democracy Project and actually vote on bills that we have available for voting. We're going to cover that in another video. But we're sending a signal that we're listening and that we're paying attention and that we are aware of what's happening around us. Legislators and staff, they track the volume of public comments. They track who's paying attention. They track when you reach out to them. Phone calls, direct email, direct conversations, that is what moves the needles with our legislators. So even small comments shape what happens. Okay. Let me know what I missed and let me know what other bills that you might like to see broken down and we can go through them together. This is a learning together process. This has been Coffee and Calculated Curiosity with your host, Cassie Clayton. And we have good coffee, but we have better questions. This is how we participate in our democracy. So I will see you next time. Thanks for taking a sip with me.